Yeah, he's here.
Clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions. The clerk will read.
Invitation resolutions being read for the first time today and referred to rules. Resolution by Representative Stevens, 164th, recognizing commending Dr. Williams James Doherty, inviting him to be recognized by the House of Representatives. Resolution commending the individual in his retirement, inviting him to appear before the House of Representatives. These following resolutions are privileged resolutions being read for the first time today for adoption. A resolution by Representative Holmes, 129, recognizing commending Mr. Roger Harrison, 2013 Outstanding Recent Alumni Award recipient, Georgia College Alumni Association. Resolution by Representative Neal, recognizing March 7th, 2013 Georgia Justice Project Day at the Capitol. Resolution by Representative Lindsay, commending the Rotary Club of Atlanta on its 100th anniversary. Resolution by Representative Holt, 112th, on the life and memory of Charles Chester King. Resolution by Representative Willard, 51st, celebrating the 30th anniversary of the magistrate court system. Resolution by Representative Brooks, the 55th, on the life and memory of Harold Hirsch.
Give that stuff to Bell.
Resolution by Representative Brooks, 55th. A resolution by Representative Wilkinson, 52nd, recognizing the Building Owners and Managers Association of Georgia, 100 years of excellence, serving as the premier association. The real estate industry, a resolution by Representative Wilkinson, 52nd, on the life and memory of Dr. William Coppage Collins. A resolution by Representative Rogers, 29th, on the life and memory of Mr. Lewis Henson. Resolution by Representative Williams, 87th, honoring Brother Derek Thornton, outstanding service as a Christian chapter number 67 associate worthy patron. Resolution by Representative Nimmer, 178, recognizing commending Mr. Stetson Bennett, longest serving constitutional officer in the state of Georgia. Resolution by Representative Martin, 49, recognizing and commending Sports Care Connect State Bank and Trust, North Metro Football League. Resolution by Representative Smith, 70th, commending Dr. Bob Haberlin, Association of Middle Level Education's 2012-2013 National Distinguished Educator of the Year. Resolution by Representative Beasley Teague, 65th, recognizing commending Ms. Rita Scott, outstanding public service. Resolution by Representative Beasley Teague, 65th, celebrating the 96th birthday of Jimmy Mima Luton. Resolution by Representative Chanel, the 120th, commending future leaders. And we have a group of resolutions by Representative Chanel, recognizing commending future leaders from counties in his district. Resolution by Representative Beasley Teague, the 65th. We have a group of resolutions by Representative Beasley Teague, honoring and commending various public officials through the privilege resolutions.
Is there objection to the adoption of the privilege resolutions? The chair hears none. The resolutions are adopted. We're back on the rules calendar. Clerk, is there a lunch still going on somewhere? The clerk and me believe that lunchtime has come and gone. Ring that bell one more time before we put anybody in the well. We are back on the rules calendar. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 132. House Bill 132.
House Bill 132 by Representative Hawkins, 27th. A bill to be entitled, Act entitled 26, Title 43, relating to pharmacists, pharmacies, dentists, dental hygienists, dental assistants, respectively, so as to provide that the Georgia State Board of Pharmacy, Georgia State Board of Dentistry are transferred from being administratively attached as the Secretary of State to the Department of Community Health. Bill having been for the House Committee on Regulated Industries, the committee recommends this bill do pass by way of substitute. This bill is being read today for its third time.
Chair recognizes Representative Hawkins to present the bill. Representative Hawkins, just a moment. No,
Did you want me to hold
Chair was trying to determine if debate had been limited on this, and the gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to bring House Bill 132. This is a bill that moves the Board of Pharmacy and Board of Dentistry from the Secretary of State's office to the Department of Community Health. And now this has been done before. We moved the Board of Medicine 13 years ago to the Department of Community Health. And if you look on your desk, you're going to see a letter from the Board of Medicine, the Composite Board of Medicine, and they say they're ready for these boards to transfer DCH and join the medical board to offer Georgia's taxpayers a program of effectiveness and cost savings. They go on to state they're willing to share investigators, staff, computers, legal services, copiers, computerized licensing and regulatory systems, clerical services, and even office space with a common waiting reception room. Now, most of these are largely fixed costs, so you can see the savings for the citizens of Georgia. Now, there's been some question about how this is going to be done, and there's been some statements about these being agencies in growing government. Look at the bill, look on page 2 and page 24, on page 2, line 42, and on page 24, line 822. You will see that these are being moved as divisions. This was at the advice of counsel in the governor's office. We're not creating agencies. We're not creating agency staff. We're not creating agency funding. This is simply moving this group over this group. Now, there have been some additions also by the Attorney and Speaker's office. These were additions that safeguarded, more safeguarded the rights and the information of the patients and Georgians. There have been no additions of powers added to this bill, no powers of subpoena, added powers of subpoena, rulemaking, or change the scope of practice of dentistry, pharmacy, or hygiene. Remember, these boards are guided by opinions by the Attorney General's office, and which supplies attorneys to these boards. I don't think anyone's questioned the need of this for health care. I think there's been some questions about funding. Let's remember that the funding is in the general fund, and the funding is dispersed from there. So whether it goes to your right hand or your left hand, it's still the same money, and the focus should always be on the patients of Georgia. Now, for those of you who want transparency in government, these funds and these appropriations will show up in the OPB's report, and so you'll be able to see how much these boards are getting, which you don't see now. You'll have direct input to that. So when you go home and you see the folks at home, you can say that you supported a bill that did not grow government, that created more efficiency in government and increased transparency. I ask for your support and your vote for this bill today. Mr. Speaker, I yield to questions.
You have a couple of questions. Chair recognizes Chairman Dollar to your left for a question.
Hey, does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Representative, can I understand why you're bringing the bill? I've had people from both sides of this issue come and talk to me about this.
Sure.
I can say that one concern I have is that just from a personal standpoint and in a real world kind of way, I have a much easier time getting my phone calls returned from boards other than the Milk Composite Board. And I think we understand why that is, because there's just less accountability to us. So for that reason, I think that the members, that's something that they need to consider when we are removing this board out from where it currently is.
Well, Representative Dollar, I regret to hear that. That's the first time I've heard that. What I have heard, people are on hold. In fact, it was just mentioned the other day in committee, 140 calls on hold. I mean, it's one thing to be on hold when you got a problem with your plumbing, but when you got a problem with your health care and you hear 139 ahead of you, that's a big problem. And that's what's going on right now. Thank you for the question.
You yield for a further question?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Randall to your left for a question.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it not true that this licensing board that houses these two boards is in Macon, Georgia?
Yes, it is.
Would you further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any idea how this bill would affect employment of those administrative support staff in that office? Do you know how many jobs this may put at risk?
Well, right now the sharing of personnel is very, very heavy. And in fact, if you hear anything from anyone else who's involved with any boards, they feel like there's not enough people down there now. So if anything, it's going to allow some people to be freed up. Because if you notice in the letter from the Composite Board of Medicine, they're ready for them to come. I mean, they've got staff, they've got computers that are set up for licensing, and it's going to be a lot quicker system. So, you know, if you look at both sides, if those people staying in Macon will be able to help the other boards much more efficiently.
Do you further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
One last question.
Yep.
Yes, you're correct in that they do share, a lot of the personnel in that office, they do share and work on several boards. However, with the amount of money that will be coming from this, if this bill goes through, from the licensing paid by the dentist and by the pharmacist, that money will be then come out of the Secretary of State's office. And do you think it's possible to maintain that entire staff if that amount of money comes out of that budget?
Well, you know, Representative Randall, a lot of that money is used for reimbursement of travel, of paper, the functions of the boards, the attorney that comes from Atlanta down to Macon. So that money will just follow the board. And as far as staff, if there's someone in Macon that really wants to stay with these boards, that's a possibility too. I can't speak for the boards, but I think this is an open process.
So you don't think that this will affect the operating and the number of staffers that are now currently employed? You don't think this bill will affect that in any way, negatively?
I do not believe that it will be negative to allow people to do a job more efficiently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have more questions if you care to yield.
I'll take some more questions.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hamilton to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
I'm really trying to find a way to support this bill. I've talked to you about it, and I really am. I'm still trying to get my hands around, and I would appreciate it if you would kind of walk through this for me one more time, if you would. Help me understand. It's my understanding that in the last 3 months, that Secretary of State's office had in excess of 100,000 phone calls that ended by hanging up because they were on hold so long. If we remove these two boards and put them into a new area, I'd like to understand what the cost of that new operation is, computers, people, all of those things, and then knowing that they're already, because of staff reductions, they already can't handle the phone volume in excess of 100,000 over a 3-month period, there's no leeway to make any more cuts there. They're so far behind. How can this be anything but an incremental cost to government? And I ask that in the friendliest way I know. I'm really trying to get to the bottom of this. I'd appreciate it if you could explain that to me. Thank you
Absolutely.
very much.
Thank you for your question. Again, let me refer you to the letter that's on your board from the Georgia Composite Medical Board. And if you look in that second paragraph, they state the things I had mentioned before, that they're ready for them to come. They already have the computers. They got the fixed cost, hard cost already. We'll just share in their cost. So what you may be concerned about on one hand in this department over here on the Secretary of State's office, you're going to save on this hand. Remember, all the money's coming from the same budget. It's all coming from the general fund. It's not like this department, this department, this department's got their own money that comes in, and the fees and fines and all, it doesn't go into those departments. It goes into that same general fund.
Will the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
But it's my understanding that with an average volume of over 30,000 calls a month that they currently cannot even get to, that if you pull this out of the Secretary of State's office, that they're still not going to be able to take any reductions or cost decreases because they can't handle the volume as it is right now. So any cost that you create in this new organization is going to be an additional cost, unless I'm just missing something here.
You talking? Let me make sure I'm following you. You're talking about additional cost when these guys on this end of the hall go to the other end of the hall and set up shop in that room where the computers work, and the phone lines are still being paid for by the same state, and I appreciate your question, and I know in your heart you really mean this, and I appreciate you watching out for the taxpayers of Georgia. But then also I've got to think, well, if we don't have those two boards there, all those folks on hold, they're going to be calling into the medical board. They're going to be calling into another office. So it really seems to me it would lighten the load in the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, one final question.
Sure.
So what you're saying is that when this happens, that the call volume at the Secretary of State's office is going to decrease such that those 30,000 unanswered calls per month are going to go away because you're going to handle those over in this new area.
I hope we don't have 30,000 calls about dentistry. I don't think we do. And I don't think we have that much about pharmacy. But I will tell you this, the calls about dentistry and the calls about pharmacy are about healthcare issues, and those are very important calls, and I hope that they will be answered much quicker.
You have more questions if you care to yield.
Yes, sir.
The chair recognizes Chairman Knight to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
And I think to follow up, isn't it true on the chairman's question, and I think you tried to illustrate the point, is that the different boards out there have different call volumes. And that some may have less call volumes than maybe some of the other boards that are very call intensive. And I would say that your board may be in that situation of less call volume that would come in, but as you said, very, very important phone calls that are being missed.
Right.
Would that not be true?
Right.
And furthermore, wouldn't it be safe to say that as far as the allocation of money that our boards or our licensees, our licensees, our professionals out there are paying, the allocation of that money is not necessarily going back ratably into across the board into all these different boards that are there. In other words, some boards may be supporting other boards. Would not be true?
Yeah, I don't know, to speak to the matter, I don't know if other boards are supporting other boards, but you are right. The fees that go in do not come back out in the cost, but you know, these are pretty tough times, and economically we're all taking hits, and every department's having to tighten their belt. And so, yeah, as a practicing dentist, I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is when when I was president of the Dental Association, it's been going on for years, I would have members come to me and say, you know, there's so-and-so practicing down here, and I don't think he has a license. You know, and there's nobody, and I've called, and they did get through back then, but there was no investigators to go. And that's a real problem. I mean, it's a problem for us because it reflects on us as providers. This is a problem for the legislature because it reflects on what we do and our outcomes. So, you know, I'd rather focus on that. You know, things like the pill mill, that's a very important subject. Right now, we only have 5 Georgia Drug and Narcotics agents left. So moving over there, we can utilize the investigators of the medical board. And you saw some changes in the bill that allows us, the dental, to be able to utilize post agents. We've never had to do that before, but if you got one there that's available, you know, we'll send him out. And also you noticed in the bill that the pharmacist can hire a non-post investigator, is somebody that we could use. So everybody's trying to work together to help each other with this.
Representative,
Yes.
I appreciate the bill, and quite frankly, I'm very supportive of your bill, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir. Do you want me to? You mean to sit down?
Well, I just was going to point out that you're not in the Senate anymore, so you don't have to continue yielding.
Okay. One more.
One more.
How's that?
Chair recognizes the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Lindsay, to your right for.
I changed my mind. Can I do
okay. Now he yields well.
I yield.
No. Unfortunately, given the seriousness of this bill, I'll wait till your second bill to give you a hard time. Let me just sort of break this down if I understand. We're basically moving these boards from a department where they has overcapacity to a department that has undercapacity, so that by doing so, we're going to make these boards more responsive to folks.
That's exactly right. And this bill is patterned after the transfer of the medical board. It's the reason for the length of the bill.
Number 2, we are moving these boards to be under a department that already has extensive expertise when it comes to healthcare related issues.
You're correct.
So that as a result of moving these 2 boards, we will be hopefully improving the quality of healthcare in the state of Georgia.
We will.
Thank you very much for bringing the bill.
Thank you.
I look forward to your second one, and we'll give you a little bit harder time that time.
Mr. Speaker, I yield well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Representative Henson to speak to the bill. She waves. All right, we have other members that have signed up. They're all waving. They're all waving. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 132 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 132. The ayes are 122, the nays are 46. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 549. House Resolution 549.
House Resolution 549 by Representative Reinders, 152nd, a resolution creating the House Study Committee on Professional Licensing Boards and for other purposes. Resolution has been for the House Committee on Appropriations. Committee recommends that this resolution do pass. Being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes, what purpose does Representative Drenner rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to be ready to ask the question for the next person. So I went ahead and pushed my button in advance.
And he's ready to not yield,
okay.
so...
I want to make sure to get on your board early.
You don't want to, you're on the board, but he hadn't yielded, so... Chair recognizes Representative Reinders, Chairman Reinders, to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House, and especially you, Representative Drenner. There's been a lot said about licensing boards. What direction is the state going to go in? Where should they be? What should the fees be? All of those are reasonable questions. This is simply a simple resolution that says, you know what? The Speaker of House is going to look at this, going to appoint the appropriate member so we can do a study committee this summer on that, and it'll be my strong recommendation that we give some consideration to Representative Drenner since she lobbied for it early. And if there's no questions, Mr. Speaker, I'll ask for your favorable consideration.
You remember that someone wanted to ask you a question.
That's correct. And
do you yield for a question?
I do. I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to know my button works back here.
It does.
Chairman Reinders, do you yield?
I do.
I wanted to ask the previous author of House Bill 132 this question, and since you came up right after him, I thought I would ask you if you don't mind. I'm sure you don't mind, do you?
Well,
Chairman,
I think it's
Mr.
obvious to the entire members
Yeah.
here that my intellectual capabilities are somewhat lacking according to the previous speaker's stupendous mind.
I won't make any personal comment with regard to that. Although the question is sincere. We just passed House Bill 132. I'm curious why we would be doing a study committee resolution on professional licensing boards after we just changed 2 boards. Why would we have not included that into this particular study committee is really what my question was.
And I thank you so much for that logical question. I think it's the same reason why earlier we passed Representative Hightower's House Bill 125. It's because this body is sensitive to the needs of the Secretary of State's office in regards to the backlog. I think Representative Hightower's bill to take some of that pressure off, I think this bill to take some of that pressure off helps alleviate that until we can actually get in and look at it. But that's a great question, and I thank you for that. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of House Resolution 549, the ayes are 166. The nays are 4. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 458. House Bill 458.
House Bill 458, by Representative Atwood, 179th, bill to be entitled Act, amending Code Section 44-394, relating to damage or destruction of units, restoration, vote not to restore an allocation of insurance deductible so as to change maximum allowable casualty insurance deductible imposed by condominium associations. Bill has been for the House Committee on Insurance. Committee recommends the bill do pass. This bill is being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Glenn County, Representative Atwood, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, please forgive my hoarseness. I ask for your favorable consideration of House Bill 458. It does one simple thing. It increases the deductible cap for condominium associations insurance policies from $2,500 to $5,000. That's all it does. In the current marketplace, it is virtually impossible for a condominium association to obtain an insurance policy with a $2,500 deductible, and these policies often begin at deductibles of $10,000 or higher. And accordingly, at the time of loss, the association is then forced to pay any deductible amount above $2,500 out of its operating budget. And then what happens is it forces every member of the condominium complex to share the cost of an individual unit. This has been brought to us and has the support of the Community Association Institute of Georgia, and the Independent Insurance Agents of Georgia also do not object to it. And I believe it gives us a good free market approach. It should be left up to each individual what kind of insurance they purchase and how much they should be, how much of a deductible they should have. So I believe it's a good free market approach to it, and I ask for your support.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 458 will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 458. The ayes are 170, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 506. House Bill 506.
House Bill 506 by Representative Smiley of the 135th, a bill to be entitled Act, to amend the General Act entitled Act to amend Title 15, Official Code of Georgia relating to Superior Courts, to provide the selection of Chief Judge, Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit. Bill has been for the House Committee on Judiciary. The committee recommends the bill to pass. The bill is being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes the Dean of the House of Representatives, Chairman Smiley, from Columbus, Muskogee County, to present the bill.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a bill, you know, you all were nice enough to pass a bill giving us 6 to 7 judges in the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit. Right. What this bill does is change the method of how the judges how the chief judge is elected. Presently, the chief judge is the person that served the longest continuous service, is acknowledged as the chief judge, but our judges have, not unanimously, but our judges have asked us to come back and to change the method, the process of electing the chief judge by stating that a majority vote of the total number of judges now will be selected as the chief judge. So what we're doing is ask that you change the method in the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit so that the chief judge will be elected by a majority of the votes of the judges that are sitting rather than by the one with the longest continuous amount of service. That's it, Mr. Speaker. If there are no questions, I'll be happy.
You do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Rogers is recognized to your right for a question.
To the gentleman in the well, do you yield?
Yes, sir.
Notice in the bill, did I not read it's done by secret ballot? Did
Yes.
I read that?
Yes.
So you got judges that don't like to tell somebody yes or somebody no? Or
You read it.
will you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Is
To
this
to a long time friend.
Is this done on all 48 circuits?
I'm not sure about the other ones because I just deal with one.
Okay.
That's Chattahoochee, the one which I reside in.
And how many, how many judges did you say were in this?
We have 6 presently, and if the will of this House, when we leave here, if it's the judgment of the members of the Appropriations Committee in this body, we'll have 7, from 6 to 7. This was recommended by the council because of the workload in the Chattahoochee circuit, and then going from 6 judges to 7. We passed that bill, but now we're dealing with the methodology of how the chief judge is elected or selected.
Will you further yield?
Yes, sir.
As you mentioned, it's usually done on seniority.
I'm sorry. Most of the circuits are different. When I went to the legal counsel on behalf of this, the judges in Columbus and in our delegation, this was a general bill because it affects the selection of chief judges. So with that in mind, they voted. So when this passed, they'll have to go back and select the chief judge according to this bill.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
You have no further questions?
No further questions, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 506 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 506, the ayes are 166, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 382. House Bill 382.
House Bill 382 by Representative Powell, the 171st. The bill will be entitled 51, relating to general provisions for torts so as to limit liability for a governing authority of a school that enters into a recreational joint use agreement with a public or private entity, provide for definitions, provide specifications for a recreational joint use agreement. Bill has been for the House Committee on Judiciary. The committee recommends the bill pass by way of a committee substitute. This bill is being read today for the 3rd time.
The chair recognizes Chairman J. Powell to present the bill. Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is House Bill 382. There are school facilities all over the state that after 3:15 in the afternoon have gymnasiums, ball fields, tennis courts, etc., that are not being utilized. And they are, in many instances, willing to let these be utilized by other groups, whether it's a YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club, city or county recreation programs. But they're concerned about the liability of somebody getting hurt on these premises while they are not in control and someone else is in control. This bill provides that if they enter into a joint use agreement that has certain minimum liability provisions as far as liability insurance and other provisions, that as long as they do that, that they are not waiving their sovereign immunity. Mr. Speaker, if there are no questions, I'll be happy to yield the well and ask for the favorable consideration of the bill.
You have a question. Do you yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes your neighbor and from Dougherty County, Representative Dukes, to your left for a question.
Yes, sir.
Would my neighbor yield?
Yes, sir.
Look, I guess what I'm trying to understand, who would be responsible for the liability in this particular instance, because I think it's good legislation, but a lot of times we have schools and all, and they have denied use of the facilities by different organizations because of that same reason, for that cause. Is that not true?
Well, yes, liability is always up to a court. But what this does is it says that the school board will require the entity that leases the facility to carry a certain amount of insurance. So if they are found liable, then they will have the resources to pay any kind of claim.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask for favorable consideration.
The chairman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 382 will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 382, the ayes are 170, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 512. House Bill 512.
House Bill 512 by Representative Jaspers, the 11th. Bill to be entitled Act Amendment Title 16 relating to dangerous instrumentalities and practices, so as to change provisions relating to carrying weapons in unauthorized locations. Change provisions relating to persons exempt, provision of Code Section 1611-126 through 1611-127.2. To change legislative findings, provide for preemption for weapons other than firearms, provide for a cause of action for damages. Bill has been for the House Committee, Public Safety, Homeland Security. Committee recommends the bill passed by a committee substitute. Bill's being read for its third time. What you got, Marshall?
This House will come to order, please. We had a little outburst of noise, and we're still on the rules calendar, and we've still got a lot of bills to get through. So please keep your conversations non-existent if you're on the floor. Pursuant to Rule 33.3, the Rules Committee of this House has limited debate on this measure to not more than 1 hour, with the time to be allocated at the discretion of the chair. The chair is going to allocate 30 minutes to each side. That does not include the chairman's time, nor does it include the minority report. The chair recognizes Representative Jaspers to present the bill. Representative Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and fellow representatives. This morning I bring to you House Bill 512 with an amendment that's in your notebook. I know the Second Amendment is important to every one of us here today. And just a quote from our state constitution, it's a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But the General Assembly shall have the power to prescribe the manner in which the arms are borne. My grandfather was an immigrant from Holland. He would tell me very often that the Constitution is what makes our country great, especially private property rights. And he felt that is what separated us from many other countries. I want to thank Chairman Meadows, who has worked closely with me on this bill and whose steady hand and wise counsel has helped me so much. Chairman Roberts and Chairman Powell for the encouragement a couple of months ago to take this on. I named 512 the Safe Carry Protection Act because it's designed to keep Georgians safe, improve Georgians with a license, ability to carry in more places, and protect themselves. This bill is for our residents who've gone through the process of fingerprinting, background checks to obtain a Georgia weapons carry license, whom I normally call the rule followers. We'll be working from Title 16 of the code that relates to possession of firearms. I'll start in 512, and it's a long bill, so I'm going to take a little time to make sure we really cover it. And thank you for your indulgence. In Section 1.2, we see the word private. It's added many times. This clarifies what private property owners are in control of their property and can make use of the trespass laws to enforce their rights as it relates to carrying guns on their property. Again, property rights are a powerful economic force in our country. Section 1.3 talks about carrying weapons in unauthorized locations. It defines where it doesn't apply. In line 68, we are removing in a place of worship. Only 3 states in the United States forbid carrying in the church by statute. When I looked at this, I was talking to my daughter Elizabeth, whose husband Justin is a pastor. I'll never forget the call that we made, and I was telling her what I was doing, and she goes, "Dad, I've got a question for you. Why is the state of Georgia, or any state, involved in the policy of what goes on inside of a church?" And it really committed me to make sure that I moved on this one. And it's also private property. In line 72, we remove bars. 25 states allow bar carry. Current law in Georgia allows a bar owner to decide whether a license holder can enter. This is private property rights. In line 105, we're talking about government buildings. 36 states now allow permitted citizens to carry in government buildings. The license holder will be able to carry into a government building that is not restricted or screened by security personnel during the hours the government building is open. Remember, the license holders are not a threat. In Section 1.4, we're talking about schools. We are not talking kindergarten through 12th grade, nor private colleges and technical schools. We're talking about our public technical schools and universities and colleges. Criminals are armed not only with their weapons, but the knowledge that the law-abiding people on campuses are disarmed, making campus folks easy prey. Our campus security teams have made it their priority to protect our students, and I thank them for that. The problem is not just the campus, but also the parking lots and off-campus fringe areas where our students have to walk through to get to classrooms, just like my daughter does. 19 states allow college campus carry, including California. In this bill, we're, like I said, addressing public technical college universities. The limits we put on it were that no athletic sporting events, nor in residence halls, including fraternity and sorority houses. Remember, when you're thinking about it, these people have a license, they're over 21. In Section 1.6, we keep moving through. An unusual thing in here is we talk about pleas of nolo in Georgia that result in a conviction. They will remain this way. But in other states, that's not the case. By pleading nolo in Florida, this will result in something along the lines of a first offender with no adjudication, but it cannot get a license in Georgia because it will show up that he pleaded nolo. So by having convicted, will mean convicted in Georgia. We keep the results of nolo in Georgia, but we recognize that other states don't do everything the way we do. In line 291, this section talks about the probate judge. And I think you'll find in my talk the probate judge is a very powerful person when it comes to giving the concealed weapons licenses out. They can revoke a license for issues like falsification of documents. If they are made aware of chronic alcohol or drug use and mental competency, they may take action to revoke someone's license by hearing. This will allow people who the current law appears to make it impossible for someone who has ever had a license revoked to obtain a license again in their lifetime. It is up to the probate judge, so we're putting them what I call in a timeout for 3 years so that they may reapply so their probation doesn't last forever. In line 309 through 307, with our amendment that's in your book, I'll discuss. The focus of this amendment is to keep the licenses out of hands of those who have been involuntarily committed to inpatient and outpatient facilities. The definition of involuntary treatment means that an inpatient or outpatient treatment in which a patient is required pursuant to this chapter, knowing that inpatient means that you are a harm not only to yourself but to others, and outpatient means that there's a potential harm to yourself or others. Our proposed change under J says that no license shall be issued to any person, as you look there on line 14, it starts, have been adjudicated mentally incompetent to stand trial, has been adjudicated not guilty by reasons of insanity, is on the state sexual register, offender registry. K, any person who within 5 years immediately preceding the application has had a guardian or conservator appointed to represent the person as a result of a mental illness or chronic or drug dependency. L, any person who within 5 years immediately preceding the application has made a credible threat to do physical violence to another, which the threat was heard by a law enforcement officer. And M, any person who within 5 years preceding has had involuntary treatment. And I told you what it was, and the nice thing about this is if you happen to be involuntary treatment, it is at the discretion of the judge that you can apply to, and he will issue the license or renew a license. And if you take issue with that, it's in a court. You can go up the court line if you want to argue with them. I think it's a very solid change. It's very tight. It's different than the way we do it now. As we keep on going, the rest of that section are just definitions about reporting. Okay, also fingerprints, which we come to next. Fingerprints will not be required for applicants seeking temporary renewal. I think that makes pretty good sense to everyone because our fingerprints do not change. It will save Georgians money. You still will be checked through GCIC, and it will take 5 business days to do that. And F, this is just cleanup language by the council. If you've not seen a new Georgia weapons license, here's what my wife's looks like. They're real pretty. This is what mine looks like. They've changed a lot in the last few years. In section 1.6, we're adding to the exempt list our young men and women who have been honorably discharged from the military, just like we had retired judges the other day. In section 1.7, this is the language from Chairman Battle's bill, House Bill 35, which gives the Board of Education an option to designate one or more employees to possess a weapon in the school safety zone. The Public Safety Committee worked very hard on this bill to ensure much safety and common sense and liability in this bill. In line 498, it's the language from Chairman Powell's House Bill 356 to simply create a statute by which those who unknowingly carry a firearm into a commercial air service airport will be charged with a misdemeanor. And if there's an intent to commit a crime, it's a felony. Section 1.8 is a great part which will give sole authority to regulating possession, transportation, carrying, transfer, sale, etc., the General Assembly, which will create a uniformity in our weapons laws across the state, allow easier transport and movement across the state for our citizens. In Part 2, these are changes by just legal counsel that if you've done a long bill like this, you know you have to do. Mr. Speaker, that's my presentation. I'll be glad to attempt to answer any questions.
You have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to your right for a question. Well, he's away. Chair recognizes Chairman Rogers to your right for a question.
Gentleman, well, do you yield?
Yes, sir.
On the fingerprinting requirements, can you, I know I've got a carrying permit too, but once I get a carrying permit, I don't have to be fingerprinted going forward, correct?
If we are fortunate enough to pass this bill through the House and Senate and signed by the governor, yes, sir, that'll be true.
Okay. Will you further yield?
You bet.
I saw in the bill private vocational schools, and
yes,
we
sir.
struck private but on one section we did not. That may be just a technical thing. Can you?
That was done by legal counsel, and that was
by the attorneys.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
To that, it will keep the private technical schools out of our regulation, and because they are private property, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You have some more questions?
Yes, sir.
And the time is running.
Okay.
Chair recognizes Representative Wilkerson to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
I appreciate you taking the time to explain the bill to us. Even though I don't carry a gun myself, I do have some questions, though. As far as carrying on college, it's my understanding that you would not be able to carry this in a dorm. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir.
So if I carry it on campus, where do I keep it when I'm in my dorm?
You would not be able to keep it in your dorm. So you'd have to leave it in your car, or you'd have to make the decision not to carry it at all.
Okay, so if I live on campus and I wanted to carry it, I'd have to keep it in my car or some other location, but not in the dorm. Okay.
Just for your information, cars are in the code that where you can leave if it's locked, you can leave your weapon there with a license.
Okay, thank you. Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir.
Okay, one last one. In schools, I know some of my principals are concerned regarding keeping, they don't want to carry it. So if I have children in public school, if I do not want my children to go to a school where there is a gun, or vice versa, I want my child to go to a school where there is one, do I have that option to go somewhere else under this bill? Are you giving me that option as a parent?
No, sir. I do not address that in this bill at all.
Okay. And finally, so if the parent trigger bill passes, would I be able to use the parent trigger to? Thank you, sir. I yield.
Thank you.
You have other questions if you care to yield.
The time's running. I'll do one more, and then we'll.
One more question. Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to your right for a question.
Gentleman yield.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize for not being here. I was actually trying to get this ascertain the answer rather than to take up time of the House, but I could not. So my question is in the original bill, the original language spoke to any person who had been hospitalized in an inpatient facility. In the original bill, you had inserted the word involuntary. Now, in your amendment, should it pass, it's being done in a different manner. And
yes.
You articulated that correct. My question to you is, do you not feel that this in any way loosens the ability of one to achieve a permit if one is voluntarily admitted to a mental institution? And does that, can you give me the logic behind someone that is voluntarily admitted?
I think the very first thing you have to think about is someone who voluntarily commits themselves has control of their faculties. They know they need help, and they're addressing it. If we did something to do it the other way, we may absolutely put a stigma on them. They would not seek treatment, which is the worst, because I think it's the policy of our state to encourage people to seek mental health treatment whenever we can.
Would gentlemen further yield?
Yes, sir.
And I mean this as a friendly question. I am not by far a mental health expert, although some people would say that maybe I need to have some from time to time. But I guess I worry about someone that is on the verge of being, committed involuntarily, going into a facility, going through the treatment and coming out. Is there any provision that if one is voluntarily admitted, which I believe it means you can check out it anytime you like, that a doctor's opinion of them not being ready to leave, could you put them into your category of that they did in fact then receive involuntary treatment?
I think
I
the
don't
doctor
know
would.
the further definition that's in Code Section 37.3.1. So the question is, if you voluntarily go into a facility and the doctor deems you're not ready to leave, but you then can in fact leave on your own, does that make one subject to Code Section 37.3-1? I thank the gentleman for taking the time to listen.
Couldn't follow you on this, but it doesn't address that. It does not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader of the House, Leader O'Neill to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be very brief. I'm not here to talk about hunting rights or whether or not I ought to have a silencer when I hunt, or really don't even care about that. But what I do care about is my right and your right to protect yourself. And until our government can unconditionally assure our safety, I will fight for your right and my right to protect ourselves and our family. And as long as bad guys have guns, I'll fight for good guys to have guns. Mr. Speaker, I yield the will.
The gentleman has yielded the will. Chair recognizes Chairman Roberts to speak to the bill. Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be brief, but I did want to come down here today and say a few words on this piece of legislation. You know, does this carry it as far as some of us would like? Probably not. But you know, in the words of Ronald Reagan, if you give me 70 to 80% of what I'm asking for, I'll take it. Then I'll come back and try to get the other 20 to 30%. Let's talk about this bill for a little bit, talk about what it does. You know, I've gotten some emails that said that this is going to take away our rights and all. This does the opposite of that. Currently, you can't carry on a campus. Under this bill, you can, with some limitations. Currently, you can't carry in government buildings. Under this bill, you can, with some limitations. Currently today, you can't carry in a church. Under this bill, you can. So this bill simply moves the ball forward, is a step in the right direction, and is one that I think, as a pro-Second Amendment person, we need to pass and move it in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to yield the will. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the will. Chair recognizes Representative Hightower to speak to the bill. Representative Hightower.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Second Amendment, what a wonderful piece of our history. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. 27 words that set our country apart from almost every other part of the world. However, as important as those 27 words are, many of us no longer know the history behind these words. I grew up in rural Georgia, where hunting is not just a hobby, but a way of life. While growing up, I would hear my friends say, "I'm an avid hunter and I dare anyone to try to take my guns away from me." But the importance of the Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. Our founding fathers viewed the right to bear arms as a God-given right. Our founding fathers viewed the right to bear arms as a way of facilitating a natural right of self-defense, repelling invasion, enabling the people to organize a militia system, and deterring a tyrannical government. Let me focus on the last one in that list for just a moment. The Second Amendment was put in place in large part so that the citizens of this great nation could stand against its own government if the day ever rose to deem that necessary once again. A wise man once said, "A healthy dose of fear goes a long way." That wise man was my father. Growing up, he had a paddle that hung beside the door that entered into our house. And I assure you, he was never scared to use it. The paddle was a constant reminder and deterrent when I found myself wavering on what I should do and if I was going to follow the rules of his house. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States is a house run by the people. It is my firm belief that the people should not fear our government, but our government should stay fearful of the people. And it is for these reasons that we must fight to protect the Second Amendment and our God-given right to bear arms. The constituents of my district entrusted me to come here and stand strong for what they believe in, and they believe in the Second Amendment and its original intent. With that said, As I previously mentioned, many of my constituents, my friends, and my family members have said on numerous occasions, I dare someone to try to take my guns. However, I venture to say if the law required them to surrender their guns, many of them would. They would do so because they are law-abiding citizens. They would do so because they would be afraid of going to jail if they refused. They would do so because they would be afraid of not knowing what would happen to their family if they did not cooperate. But I am here today to make sure no one in this great state of Georgia ever has to make that type of decision. I am here to stand up and fight for what I believe in and for what the people of my district believe in. I often get asked why we constantly talk about gun rights and the Second Amendment. My answer is simple: because there are others who are constantly trying to take our rights away. As long as there are those who try to infringe upon our God-given right to bear arms, there will be others, such as myself, to stand firm and uphold the Constitution of this nation. I ask for you to support HB 512. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Chairman Battles to speak to the bill. Chairman Battles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to first of all say thank you to Representative Jaspers for bringing this bill, and an obvious reason that it's selfish a little bit on my part, because tagged on to the end of this bill was a bill that I introduced at the beginning of the session, which is, you may remember, was House Bill 35. What this is a school safety bill, and I want to talk about it for just a second and to let you know that it's here and it has a purpose. Many of our school systems in Georgia do not have the resources that they need to provide a security officer in each one of their schools. They're already, because of budget constraints, unable to take care of the necessities like teachers and some other vital areas in school life. And one of those, of course, is in the area of schools. Many of them might have them in their high schools and their middle schools, but the elementary schools are not protected. What this portion of this bill does is give the opportunity to boards of education, if they choose to do this, and I want to say this very loudly, very clearly, this is not a mandate, this is a may. School systems may choose to do this, not shall do this. If they had determined that there is someone within their school system, maybe one or more, that would qualify to be trained and to be certified so that they might be the security officer in their school, then they will choose to do that. Along with not only choosing that individual, these are some of the things that they must do. They must go through the mandate training or the equivalent for that type of training for security for schools. They have to go through all the background checks, the mental and emotional evaluations that will show to them to be stable and able to take care of not only themselves but also a situation that might arise. Again, this is a way to provide some security that presently is not in many of our systems and in many of our schools. The cost of providing a security officer in one school, we figured somewhere between $65,000 to $85,000 per school. And many of them have 5 to 12 to 15 schools in their school district that need a security officer. You could very quickly go through the simple math and see how much that would cost for one system, and then you could certainly look at the state as a whole. So this is not anything other than giving the school boards the right to look within their staff and to be able to choose someone. And when I say choice, this is not coercion. If a person is asked, in fact, would they be that security person, they can decline. Also in this legislation, it says if they are unwilling to serve in that capacity, they cannot be dismissed for that. The school systems would take the responsibility and the liability of making sure that all the training that is necessary for these individuals that would be the security officers in their school, they would take all the liability and then they would take the cost. Or there could be other ways than in raising the funds to take care of the training. So this portion of the bill, and I appreciate Representative Jasper giving me an opportunity to just share with you what this additional portion to this bill does. It is for school safety, and it is an optional portion of this bill. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them, and if not, I would yield the well.
You have some questions. There are 3 other speakers who must now share 3 minutes and 5 seconds.
I think I'll yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Chairman Neal to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I heard 3 minutes for 3 speakers, so I know what that means. Let me just say thanks to everybody that's involved in this bill, first of all, and focus on one area of the bill that I have on 2 occasions introduced legislation to remove the exemption for places of worship. I pastored for 25 years. I know that within places of worship, there are, within those places of worship under existing law, there's no way for us to be able to have a proper defense within those places of worship. As the plates are passed and the funds are collected, there's no way to defend ourselves. As we have families that are struggling with relationship issues and dysfunction within the family, and those family members are coming to church where they're being fed in that church setting, while someone in that family may be looking to cause problems within the family, that creates a very vulnerable position for that family and for the church to be in if there's no way to provide protection. And that's just one of the reasons why I encourage you to vote for House Bill 12. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll yield for the next 2 speakers.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Representative Kirby to speak to the bill. Representative Tom Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is not a gun bill. This is a bill about safety and security. We don't have a gun problem in this country. What we have is a violence problem. And that's a topic we ought to be addressing, is how to curb violence. But a person with evil in their heart with a baseball bat and a Bowie knife is just as dangerous to one little teacher and a bunch of 6 or 7-year-olds in a classroom. This is about how to properly defend ourselves. Here in Atlanta, we just recently had a conviction of 4 men who simply at random picked the next boy into the line of a party and they beat him to death. We have a violence problem in this country. Give our citizens the tools to protect themselves. That's why this bill is about safety and security. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Representative Cook. Representative, you have 35 seconds.
That'll be just enough time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill today is about the natural rights of each and every human being to protect themselves. That's what this is about. Gun-free zones inhibit law-abiding citizens from being able to protect themselves, while individuals with criminal intent can take over. We've seen this time and time again. And as former law enforcement, I can tell you, we can't be there all the time. You have to be there to protect yourself. So I encourage each and every one of you to vote for HB 512. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, now we have members who wish to speak in opposition to the measure. And then we have one member that asked to speak against an amendment. So we're going to go to those members who want to speak against the measure. The chair recognizes Representative Henson. Representative Henson. Representative Henson to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleagues here in the House.
One can believe in the Second Amendment and gun safety at the same time, and I do, and that's why I stand here today opposing House Bill 512. Our job is not simply to protect the right to gun possession, it's to protect the public from unnecessary gun violence. And I want to bring up the whole issue of concealed weapons in government buildings when security is not on the premise. And the bill does a strange and curious thing. It says to those cities and counties that it can afford to hire guards, can afford to pay for screening machines, we'll reward you by making your job easier. No one can come in here without a gun and they can detect it. But then we have small towns, single-story buildings. Our citizens work, we have public servants there, and we don't have any security on those buildings. Every gun is welcome, therefore. We all work for government here, those of us in this building, and many of us had jobs in public service before we arrived here in this well-armed, well-protected dome. And we know that public buildings are places where people attempt to settle their disputes with an unarmed and often unyielding bureaucrat who's simply doing what we told them to do at the laws we pass here. There are times they collect taxes from a man who doesn't know where his next check is coming from, or force a struggling mother to pay a water bill with the money that she's saving for her child's doctor. There's many situations like that, and government buildings are places where tensions are already high, and yet this bill will allow guns to be brought into those buildings, concealed weapons no less. In 2005, Brian Nichols escaped police custody during his trial in a Fulton County courthouse. He was able to retrieve a gun while assaulting a sheriff. And yes, we know the sheriff was supposed to be able to have that gun, but he then went on a murder spree. He murdered the judge, court reporter, sheriff deputy, and a federal agent. Proponents of House Bill 512 would say if a civilian could carry a gun, then Brian Nichols could have been stopped. I believe to the contrary. Brian Nichols wasn't insane, and he wasn't mentally unfit. He was mean and angry, and he had access to a weapon. But the next Brian Nichols may not be in Fulton County. He may be in a county where property tax collections have fallen so low they fired the guards to save money. And Brian Nichols may be the man who just had his children taken from him. Not a madman, but an angry man. A man with a pistol who thinks justice does not wear a robe but rides on his hips. Carrying a concealed handgun increases the chance of confrontation escalating. Judges and juries and hardworking men and women in our small town should not be put in an unsafe environment while deciding on a case where an individual's life depends on their verdict. And what's the message we send to our public servants if the person is guilty of carrying a gun in an unauthorized location? Under this bill, House Bill 512, he or she will be punished for a misdemeanor. Note, a misdemeanor, not a felony. Dismissing this serious violation of our state law as a misdemeanor is a slap on the wrist. Any crime that's this serious as a threat to public safety shouldn't just be a misdemeanor. It's simple. Passing House Bill 512 would endanger public sector workers and private citizens in government buildings. And I hope you'll join me in voting against House Bill 512 and protecting the public safety of our communities and families. Thank you.
Lady has yielded the well. The chair recognizes Representative Drenner to speak to the bill. Representative Drenner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. Let me just say before I get into my prepared remarks, for those of us that are standing here today speaking against the bill, we are not, let me repeat, we are not anti-Second Amendment people. We are not anti-Second Amendment people. I'm here today to tell you about my reservations that I have with House Bill 512. Both as a college faculty member and as a parent, I have some concerns about the situation this bill opens up to the carry, open, or concealment of weapons. House Bill 512, in my opinion, will not make Georgia safer. Let me share with you just a brief story of what happened to me this week in the classroom. I was at class the very first day, and I mispronounced a student's name. I thought it was a girl. And I said the name, and then I said, Ms. So-and-so. The student stood up
and screamed at me. It was a very tall man. And he screamed at me and he said, "I am a man." And you know what I thought at that moment? What if he had a gun? What if he had a gun? We all think about the student that's angry with a faculty member for a failing grade or distraught over a breakup as being potentially dangerous if armed on campus. But this was a student whose name I had mispronounced. Why would I want to give him a gun? What would he have done in that moment if he had had the immediate access to a firearm? A study published in 2012 in a peer-reviewed journal examined the potential impact of lifting a concealed firearm ban and presented the likelihood that a given classroom would contain at least one legally carried handgun. The study included undergraduate participants selected from 5 different academic buildings at a public university in Texas. Even in Texas, the study found that the impact of potential policy changes in this area, allowing licensed concealed handguns on a college campus, varies based on the building under consideration and the measure of potential handgun prevalence. There are just too many variables at work on college campuses. For many students, college is their first time on their own, living outside of their parents' home, away from their immediate protection. The experience brings new freedoms as well as novel stresses and competing priorities. There are a lot of life lessons college students learn outside of the classroom before they go out into the real world, truly on their own. Colleges provide a relatively safe environment for that kind of learning as well. Adding handguns could increase the number of mistakes that are permanent in nature. While we don't know for certain all of the effects of allowing permit holders to carry firearms on campuses, we can easily identify serious risk. Prudent avoidance would seem to be the best course of action, especially since we can so easily choose to not add firearms to our state's colleges and university campuses. I have a hard time understanding why we are responding to a series of tragedies by expanding the likelihood of danger. Research published in the American Journal of Public Health found that someone carrying a gun for self-defense is 4.5 times more likely to be shot than someone who is unarmed. Carrying a gun makes one more likely to be shot. Policy should be based on facts, not on rhetoric or assumptions. Allowing our college students to carry weapons on campus would not make them safer. My own kids, they're 17, and they're going to go to college next year. I don't want to have to worry about their gun-toting classmates, as well as everything else that goes through a parent's mind as children start to leave the nest. Though young adults, they are still our children, and we take seriously our responsibility to keep them from harm. Those of you who are sending your daughters to college should be particularly worried about this bill. More than 5 times as many women were murdered by an intimate acquaintance than by a stranger. Additionally, while firearm homicides involve male victims were most likely men shooting men, 95% of female firearm homicide victims were murdered by a male. In homicides where the weapon was known, 50% of female homicide victims were killed with a firearm. Of those female firearm homicides, 75% were killed with a handgun. Our fears should not be of the possible mugger on Peachtree or in downtown Athens. It should be the senior she was dating and just broke up with. I will give you 45 other reasons why I'm opposed to this bill, and I will be very brief. 45 is the number of college students who have been killed by an armed assassin on a college campus in the past year. 45 phone calls or visits made to parents to inform them that their child was murdered. And 45 families who sent their children off to college who will never see them walk across a stage to receive a degree. So I have to ask, who would the Safe Carry Protection Act protect? It's up to us as lawmakers to make sure that this number does not grow. We can do this by voting no on House Bill 512. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the lady from DeKalb County, Representative Oliver, to speak to the bill. Representative Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will vote no today on House Bill 512. I don't urge you to vote yes or no because I believe this is a personal issue more than a political issue for many of us. I want to say personally, the fact that there are more guns in society doesn't make me feel safer. It makes me feel less safe. But I don't want to talk about the emotion of fear or the emotion of intimidation. I want to talk a little bit about history and private property rights. I'm a three-generation small business person. My father had a drugstore for 30 years. He had 3 armed robberies in the 30 years, and no one was hurt. Our family members worked in the drugstore, and he felt strongly, his private property, that not having guns in the store, which some of the other pharmacists wished to have, was making it safer for his family members in the store. Those of us that choose not to own guns and choose to be concerned about the proliferation of guns in our society can be interested, I want you to be interested, in the history, just a brief history of some of our gun laws in this United States. Because we've come to a point now where we are only discussing in Georgia more guns and less oversight. We are never discussing more regulation, more safety, and more control of guns. And I think that has taken away from us a balance. We think of the Wild West as a gun-toting cowboy image, and that is a myth. In Dodge City, in 1879, I will show you a photograph, and you can come look at it at my desk. A sign at the entry of Dodge City: the carrying of firearms is strictly prohibited. In Tombstone, the wickedest city of the West, you had to turn your gun in when you came into the city. And the famous gunfight at OK Corral between the Clanton brothers and the Wyatt Earp crowd was in a city where you had to turn your guns in, and all the movies about that instance really don't portray that. You weren't allowed to take your gun into the pool hall and the beer hall, and the shoot-'em-ups didn't happen in the way the movies portrayed them because the holsters were empty based on local gun control laws of the West. The South was the leader in gun control legislation after the Civil War. Race had something to do with that. But the proliferation of gun control legislation was strongest in the South on the issues of concealed weapons. In the 1930s, the federal government, for really the first time, entered into issues of gun control in fights against the mafia, the Tommy guns. The NRA at that time, purely a body related to hunting and preservation of hunting rights, took no position in relation to the gun legislation in the 1930s and said in effect that the Second Amendment at that time did not apply. You know that the politics of gun changed by an internal fight of the NRA in the late 60s. The NRA was split within its group about whether to stay in Colorado, whether to come to Washington, D.C. The Washington, D.C. faction, the gun control, not the hunting group, prevailed. It was about an organizational politics. When I was in the Senate with the Speaker a while ago, we had a vigorous debate that certainly leaned towards less gun control, but it was a debate about gun safety. We occasionally had issues about control of the sale or stealing of guns from pawn shops that was proliferating the illegal market. We had a balanced debate. When I saw Johnny Isaacson last week, and when I think about David Scott, it was two extremes of a balanced debate that clearly was more on the gun rights area, but it was a debate. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not having a debate based on the honesty of history of this country. We are not having a debate based on a balanced view. We are only rushing for more guns, more opportunities to put weapons in the hand of our citizens, even law-abiding citizens. I spent several years as a magistrate court judge at the jail at night, weird experience, setting bonds and doing preliminary hearings. Spent a lot of time with the law enforcement. Every domestic violence case was based on a threat that most often carried with it a weapon. I don't speak about these issues emotionally. I don't have a tie to one part of the Constitution or the other, an emotion. I say to you, in our society today is off balance. We are not having a fair debate. We're only rushing towards the proliferation of more guns, and I will vote against 512. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You had a question if you care to yield. The lady doesn't yield. She has yielded the well. We had one member that wished to speak against the amendment. Representative Gregory is recognized to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize, I've been typing this up in the back as we go. So, many of you are aware, or likely aware, of the several pro-liberty gun bills I introduced earlier this session. I'm pleased to have played a part in shaping the gun rights discussion this year, and to have had my own House Bills 28 and 29, the Restoring Private Property Rights to Places of Worship Act of 2013, and the Campus Carry Act of 2013 substantially incorporated into this year's consolidated gun bill, House Bill 512. For this reason, I have vested interest in its progress and its integrity. I'm predominantly in favor of this bill. However, I have some serious concerns about the language that relates to mental health. In America, we're supposed to have the presumption of innocence and should never have to lose any rights without due process and a trial by jury of 12. Individuals shouldn't have to prove their mental competency in order to exercise natural rights. And need I remind you that gun laws don't stop criminals or crazy people, they only serve to infringe on the rights of law-abiding citizens. The mental health gun control agenda represents a very dangerous slippery slope. My primary concern with the language today is with lines 75 through 82 of Representative Jasper's amendment on your desk. I find it extremely disconcerting that a law enforcement officer, without notice or without due process, can unilaterally put an individual into a database that can be used to deny that individual his God-given natural rights. Now, I've already heard some people say, oh, don't worry about it, we'll fix it later in the Senate. The last time I've heard such foolish nonsense, it came from Nancy Pelosi when she said, we'll have to pass the bill and then we'll find out what's in the bill. I encourage you to vote no on the amendment and then yes to the bill. Thank you.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on House Bill 512? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. There is a minority report. There is a minority report on this bill. The chair recognizes to speak to the minority report Representative Holcomb. Representative Holcomb Under the rules of the House, you have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to House Bill 512. In doing so, I speak in support of the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The right to bear arms is enshrined in the Bill of Rights. It is an important part of our sense of freedom. It embodies a part of the American spirit. We are a free, independent, and self-reliant people. The right to own a gun is appropriate and important, and it is a right that must be respected. But it is long established policy in this country that there are reasonable limitations of time and place, and a recognition that property owners can have a say in whether or not weapons are allowed. The Georgia Constitution, for those who believe in state rights, states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but the General Assembly shall have the power to prescribe the manner in which arms may be borne. I want you to know that I understand the argument offered by those who support the bill. I agree with the notion that there is a deterrence aspect to some of the provisions of this law. I also know that there are those who sincerely worry about their safety and want firearms not to harm others, but to protect themselves. I get that. I also believe that proponents of this bill sincerely believe that passing this bill will lead to fewer deaths. I have a different view, and I'm not alone. There is no absolute, no kidding, right answer on gun policy. The truth is, we have no way of knowing if more lives will be lost or saved if we pass this. That's the truth. And for each story we hear evidencing why this policy is exactly the right fix, we can hear an opposing story on why that's just not true. There are cases where licensed, law-abiding citizens became murderers. It's also important to mention that there is no data, none, to support the argument that the cure for gun violence is more guns. Let me share with you a couple of stories from my own experience that have helped shape my own views. I have considerable experience with firearms. First, I served for 12 years in the armed forces. I enlisted at age 18, and I deployed 3 times. 10 years ago today, in 2003, I was in Kuwait waiting for the invasion of Iraq to begin. One of the darkest days of the war was March 23rd. The Fedayeen were attacking our forces as we made our way to Baghdad, and while that was happening, an American soldier killed 2 American officers. I tell you that because at that time, everyone had a firearm. Everyone. And that didn't prevent a tragedy. In other words, at that moment in our history, arming everyone didn't save lives. I also used to be a prosecutor. My very first case was a suicide that, after investigation, turned out to be a homicide. The tragedy occurred in a Savannah apartment outside of Hunter Army Airfield on a Saturday night. The roommates were drinking heavily and they got into a verbal argument. The victim died from a single gunshot wound to the head. And it happened because they were both drunk and because of the presence of a firearm. And that's what worries me about expanding guns onto college campuses. I'm not, by nature, a worrier. But I worry that the mix of alcohol, drugs, sex, and immaturity on college campuses could be fatal. And as I said before, I'm not alone in holding this belief. I listened to all of the testimony offered regarding this bill. Advocates for the bill spoke in favor of a strong Second Amendment and for the full exercise of their constitutional rights. And I respect those views. Many students spoke against this bill, and I respect their views. But the views that I found most compelling were those from Chancellor Huckabee, the leaders of our colleges, universities, and technical schools, as well as law enforcement personnel. To a person, they opposed this bill. To a person, and these are the professionals charged with protecting students on college campuses throughout our state, they spoke in very practical terms about their concerns for the safety and security of their charges. They worry that a proliferation of guns on campus might increase, not reduce, the risk of violence and harm. I take that testimony very seriously. I believe that their well-reasoned and honestly expressed concerns should matter enormously when weighing the consequences of this bill. I especially value the views and opinions of Chancellor Huckabee. If you had not had a chance to read his testimony, you should. As the law stands today, the Second Amendment is not absolute. The Second Amendment does not mean that guns cannot be regulated. That's simply not true. The federal government and the states have the power to impose regulations for the sake of public safety and the preservation of order. We strive to pass measures that will make us safer. In fact, this bill itself recognizes that the Second Amendment rights are not unlimited. Look at lines 222 to 223. It says we should keep guns away from athletic sporting events and student housing to include fraternity and sorority houses, explicitly recognizing the risk that guns pose in those settings. Let me prove my point a little further. We don't allow guns in the Capitol. So what we're prepared to do here is declare, over the objection of the Chancellor and of all the college, university, technical presidents, that we think y'all are wrong, and guns in classrooms are a great idea, but we're not going to allow them here in this building. The authors of this bill made an arbitrary decision to listen to those who said guns in certain settings were dangerous, sporting events and frat houses, but they tuned out when experts said guns in classrooms or dining halls were also unsafe. This isn't logical and can't be justified. Consequently, I oppose this bill because of the expansion of weapons on college campuses. Now, I also want to talk about arming local administrators, which is the section of the bill that used to be House Bill 35. I understand the intent behind the bill, and I know that it is well-intentioned. After the bill passed committee, I reached out to all of the principals in my district, every single one. To a person, they all said that they don't want this. They all said that they want resource officers, not armed administrators. I also spoke with one of the state's experts who has decades of experience on school safety. I told him about the bill and how I thought that it had some merit in terms of the deterrence argument. He told me without hesitation, and I was actually surprised by this, that he opposed the bill. He worried that if he were the person authorized to carry and had to break up a fight, the weapon could get loose and a fatality could occur, and he had experience with doing that. He also said, and I didn't know this before, that weapons are frequently forgotten and left behind. He also told me that we would not have to, or he would not want to have to terminate someone who would be carrying. That's something that I heard from all the principals in my district. It's a real concern and one that I think that we need to take seriously. I know that others may disagree with these views, but I take seriously the views of experts. And I don't view our students as prey. I see them as students. With respect to how we can best protect the public, which is our overall goal, I think we can do better. We have to do better treating those with mental illness. As you may recall, Chief Justice Hunstein said that mental health treatment is almost unavailable except if there is a threat of suicide or homicide. I'd like us to do better addressing that. And finally, I want to talk about suicide. At the end of last year, I started learning about the suicide numbers for our service members and veterans. In 2012, in the Army alone, there were 325 suicides. That's almost one a day, and it's a national crisis. And the presence of a firearm was a major factor in those numbers. Why do I raise that? I started looking a little more into the issue of suicide and a little more broadly, and what I learned is that suicide is sadly also a major issue for our college population. And that's why I have concerns about expanding access to firearms onto college campuses. This bill recognizes that, and that's why it says not to have weapons in all places at all times. And the real bottom line is this: we don't have a crystal ball on this. If the proponents of this bill could guarantee that this would save lives, you'd have my vote. Likewise, I concede that I can't guarantee that my position will save more lives. We just don't know. And so what we're left with is our best judgment about where to draw the lines on when and where guns will be permitted. We're not erasing the lines. Make no mistake about that. We're redrawing them. I think it's safer to keep the lines where they are and keep guns off campus, and that's why I'm voting no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the well.
You have questions if you care to take them.
I'll take one.
Chair recognizes Representative Morgan to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
I just have a couple of questions. The first one is, because I didn't get a chance to ask the author or the other presenters in favor of the bill, do you have a sense of what the process will be in schools for parents to be involved in a conversation regarding allowing an administrator to carry a gun on campus?
My understanding is that they will be involved in the conversation, but if it is authorized, parents will not know who will be carrying weapons in the schools, as that will be kept secret, that will be kept confidential, and it will be excluded from the state's Open Records Act laws.
And then secondly, while I respect my colleagues who have spoken today, I have to say I was offended by a comment that was made. And so my question is, do you think that the parents of Sandy Hook Elementary would agree that someone with a bat would be as dangerous as a person who tragically murdered those children?
I think we all know what the answer to that is.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. For the final word for the chairman's report, Chair recognizes the chairman of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, Chairman Alan Powell. 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to allocate a portion of that 20 minutes to the Rules Chairman, and I'm just going to speak. We've heard of a lot of passionate dialogue here this afternoon. And you know, there's nothing good about violence. I'm going to give you a thought. If there were no guns, if there was no violence, if there were no bad people, if there were no sex abusers or child abusers out there, I'd be on my hands and knees and I'd push a peanut up I-85 to the South Carolina line. But you know what? That's not the way it is in the real world. Look up there in that gallery. You see all those people up there with badges? Those are the people who are there to protect us. But you know what? They can't always protect us. They can't always protect us. I'm not going to get into dialogue about the Second Amendment because everybody knows the Second Amendment. It always has been a source of humor to me. When I hear people, first thing comes out of the mouth, I'm for Second Amendment rights, but. Well, you know, tell me about the buts. Tell me about the point when bad people come after your family, or after you, or your children, or God forbid, my grandchildren. You know, I've never thought of myself as a bad person. I've never tried to tell people about where my graveyards were. But let me tell you something. I've got a right to defend myself and those that I love just as you do. I want to talk about the process. You know, I got a little, as you know, I can be testy, but I'm not apologizing today. But I did make a comment to some folks that are very close to me about the minority report. I understood when I read all the points that was put into the minority report about why they were opposed, but one particularly struck a nerve to me. One struck a nerve that said that this committee had not properly vetted this issue in this bill. Well, I take that as an insult. And I want to say this to my friends on the minority side. Don't forget, I came from y'all once upon a time. And I understand and I live by the philosophy that every person has a right to be heard. And I'm going to tell you something. If you don't think that everybody had a right to be heard, then talk to the 15 committee members. Talk to those 15 committee members that sat through hours and hours and hours of testimony. Quite frankly, it almost got redundant to the point that it scared me when I heard people talk about the idea of what a great Christian world we live in and that we don't need firearms or any type of weapons. You do need them in certain times. I want to talk about this bill real quick. First, I want to thank some other people. I want to thank the ladies, the admins that work with our committee, leg council, all those people. Particularly, I want to thank the two ladies that work in my office over there that's had to field the emails and the phone calls because it's been quite a learning experience. You know, part of the people can't read the English language, obviously from some of their questions. A lot of them were constitutional attorneys. And quite frankly, there was an awful lot of people who were just very sincere about their rights. Nothing out of the ordinary, but their rights to protect themselves. But I want to thank them, and I want to tip my hat to them for the great job they did. I want to tip my hat to the committee members. You were very professional. You listened through the debate on every bill. And we did what we had said 3 weeks ago. We rolled up all the bills that were put in and crafted a piece of legislation thanks to Representative Jaspers and Chairman Meadows. We dealt with issues in this bill that even myself, I thought at first, you know, churches, college campuses. But I have to tell you, the predominance of the weight of this is based on if you're 21. If you're 21 years of age, that you're not a convicted criminal, that you're not one of those people out there that are suspect, if you have not in the standard on the mental health has been basically involuntary commitment and this other range of crimes, you're an adult. You're responsible for your actions. So then once you go through those hoops and hurdles, then you get a license. That's it. Private property rights. Hold your nose about churches. Hold your nose about restaurants. Hold your nose about the various things. But let me tell you something. The Second Amendment rights stops where the Fourth Amendment property rights starts. You can carry your weapon where you want if you're licensed, but you can't take it on someone's private property without their permission. And we set up the process. The laws that were on the books were very illogical, and this brings logic to it, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to these two gentlemen here and thanks to the committee that had to hear this. I'm going to step aside and I'm going to let Representative Chairman Meadows speak on this, but I would ask you for your consideration, as I had said this more than one time to the many folks, the many emails, positive, negative, and whatever, that out there in the hitherlands, the folks who live on the internet need to understand what we do here. In the crafting of legislation, this is a process and not an event. It had to pass the House, it had to pass the committee, it'll have to pass the House, it'll have to go across the hall, and there'll be changes along the way. And at the end of the day, the governor will have to make a decision to sign or veto. Hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, you will vote overwhelmingly to send this bill forward. And if you say you're Second Amendment a proponent, then I urge you to stand up and vote for this bill. And I relinquish the well to Chairman Meadows.
The chair recognizes the chairman of the Rules Committee for the final word. Chairman Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, you know, it's rare for me to come up here. I feel like sometimes that I might put too much pressure on you if I introduce a lot of bills. Because one, I never forget nothing. And it's taken me a long time to learn to forgive some people. I've got newspaper articles and a 22-minute speech up here. I've got the bill. I think that it's probably appropriate for me just to give you the background. Back in October, Mr. Jaspers and I, we share a district. We met, and I was told this morning that they were surprised that I've got something to do with this. Y'all, I've been here 68 and a half years. In my life, we've gone through some tough times. Civil rights, Vietnam. We're in tough times now. We met and we decided that we might try to chip away and to take somebody's statement that Ronald Reagan wanted, if he offered something, if he got 70 to 80% of it, he would be thankful and try to come back and get the other 20 or 30. Y'all, I want 20 or 30. We can come back. Chip away. Your rights have been chipped away little by little for a long, long time. Needless to say, Mr. Jaspers and I are not we're not attorneys, praise the Lord. So we had to have some help. And we came up with a basic idea, and I'll just tell you, we contacted Georgia Carey. We contacted Georgia Carey. They have done an excellent job in giving us guidance, and if you think this bill has what Georgia Carey wants in it, you better get in the hall and talk to them, because it don't. They've given us some ideas. They've helped us. We then got legal counsel, and I took it to the Speaker's office. Look this over. Again, this has been going on since October. Look this over. I need guidance. As y'all all have learned over the last 3 years, I am not the brightest star in the sky. I have to have help. I would suggest that some of y'all get help. We talk about part of this bill, me and the mental part of it. After 1 year down here, I suggest that maybe you all have a few problems there's got to be something wrong with you to come down here and continually get beat up when you're trying to do the people's business. But some of us like it. Some of us have been here a long time. And I appreciate those that were here before me. But I kind of get a nod that, you know, that's a pretty good bill. What did we do with that bill? Being one of those that realized that until the last day when the big boy signs it, it doesn't mean anything anyway. We took it to the governor's staff. Met with them, offered any improvements, anything you want to change. Does the governor like this bill? He likes part of it. I would hope that most of y'all like part of it. Took it to public safety. We've had about 7 versions of this bill. We've been adding over the last 3 weeks. And when I'll say that, let me just stop and say, I owe him a debt of gratitude. I owe the Speaker's staff a debt of gratitude. I owe the Governor's staff a debt of gratitude. And I owe the Board of Regents a debt of gratitude. Because we took it to them. Input. We want your input. We know you can't like the bill. We know you can't like the bill. There are other states whose boards of regents and whose technical schools have become involved. And that door is still open, ladies and gentlemen. That door is open. But we've come up with what we think is a good bill. We closed a lot of the gaps. Are there a lot of gaps out there? Yes, there is. Particularly for those of us who do believe in the Second Amendment. I loved Mary Margaret's thing on Tombstone, my favorite movie in all the world. I'll be your huckleberry. But you know what happened to all of those ERPs, don't you? The dadgum bad guys killed most of them with their guns. I wish that all of you could have seen the testimonies that were held for 4.5 hours in public safety, if it wasn't vetted enough, where everybody against this bill got to talk. The best testimony was given by a Georgia Tech student that was afraid to go to class. The best testimony is given by Rick's daughter, who lives in the same building I do and has to walk to Georgia State, and she's armed with some mace. Give me a break. Who can carry a gun? Which student can carry a gun? He's got to be, she's got to be 21 years old. They're not a freshman that's coming to the local fraternity party and getting drunk and shooting the lights out. This is not the Wild Wild West. You got to be 21 years old. Does that matter? There's another little thing in there that nobody's mentioned. Military personnel. You're willing? My country is willing to send an 18-year-old kid to Afghanistan. But he can't carry a gun. He's better trained on more weapons than anybody in the room. I think it's all right for him to carry one. We do talk about our colleges, and we did give, I felt like we did, there's not a member of the Board of Regents nor a member of the technical schools that is elected. The tail does not wag the dog. That's against the rules. Y'all remember that. You're not supposed to clap in here. If you can tell that I'm for this bill, I appreciate that. I've said it last night, and I'll tell y'all today, I don't take myself very seriously. I hope that you don't take yourselves very seriously. But I do take this job seriously. And I hope that you do. And with that, I'll end with one statement. At the beginning of every 2-year period, if you are re-elected or newly elected, it says, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of this state and of the United States. So help me God, vote yes.
The chairman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to adopting the amendment? Amendment AM 292157. The clerk will read the amendment.
Representative Jaspers for the 11th, office following amendment. Amend the substitute House Bill 512, the modified structured rule amendment by Representative Jaspers, approved by the Rules Committee, is in your calendar books in front of the bill, upper right-hand corner, AM 292157.
What purpose does Representative Smith rise?
Point of inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry?
Point of inquiry.
Parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, sir.
State your inquiry.
Is it not so that with the passage of this bill, the unintended consequence will be that we have created an environment where people that are not physically adept to protect the ownership of these weapons will become marks for people that can physically overpower them and take the weapons from them?
If the gentleman believes that, there are 2 choices of buttons on his desk when he votes. What purpose does Representative Gregory rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules in order to take up an amendment that would strike lines 75 through 82 from the amendments. Second.
That motion is out of order. The motion is out of order. Is there any objection to adopting Amendment AM 292157? Is there objection? The chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute as amended? The chair hears none. The committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 512 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 512. The ayes are 117, the nays are 56. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 434. House Bill 434.
House Bill 434 by Representative Weldon III, bill being entitled 44, relating to liens, mechanics, materialmen, by that special liens include the amount due and interest on that amount. Bill having been for the House Committee on Judiciary, the committee recommends the bill to be passed by way of committee substitute. Bills being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes Chairman Weldon to present the bill. Chairman Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. I bring to you House Bill 434 for your consideration. This bill provides that where there's a contract for constructing improvements to real property, the amount that the parties contract for is the amount that is lienable against the real property. That just means that if you build something on somebody's property and you have an agreement for the price, that's the amount that they can lien the property for. If there are no questions, Mr. Speaker,
You have a question if you care to yield.
I will yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Williams to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would gentleman yield?
Certainly.
Would you be so kind and thank you for the bill. Give us an example. I'm building an apartment complex. HVC, other folk certainly can do material. Some of the laborers can do labor liens. Tell me, what does this bill do to help who?
This provides that where the HVAC or electrical contractors or any other contractors, they go out there and they provide services such as they have to go out. It's a big project like building a apartment complex. They put a trailer out there that they have an office where they can keep up with the plans, keep up with the paperwork, keep the required notices and the licenses out there on the site, and it's required by code. That can be included in part of what they lien the property for. And that right now, this is a reaction to an appeals court case where they held that was not lienable. This changes the statute because the courts have held that the statutes are strictly construed, and this makes it where the things that they do, like putting those portable offices out there, putting other things out there necessary to get the job done, are part of what helps put the attachments on the real property and improvements thereon.
Will the gentleman further yield?
Certainly.
Have you got an estimate of what percentage, what kind of savings would this mean overall? Or what kind of impact does this have on, say, a construction project, being unable to lien this?
The impact this will have is that this gives the bargain for benefits that each party has agreed to give the consideration. One part, the contractors construct the improvements. The landowner or the general contractor has to pay the money, and they get the benefit of their bargain. That's what this does.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the will if there are no further questions.
Well, you do have more questions, but it's up to you.
I'll take one more, or a few more if I could, Mr. Speaker.
A few more.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes Chairman Jay Powell to your right for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that what current law says is that if I don't pay for particular work that I've done, that I can lien the project to make sure that I can get paid?
For the items that are attached to the real property, yes.
Okay. And isn't it further true that what your bill does is that if there's not a written contract, that I'm not out of court, that I can still get the reasonable value of the labor and services I've provided?
Exactly.
Isn't that what your bill does?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield the will.
The gentleman has yielded the will. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 434 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 434. The ayes are 166, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 486. House Bill 486.
House Bill 486 by Representative Roberts, 155th, bill being entitled 32, relating to dimensions, weight of vehicles, and loads, so as provide for qualifications for the issuance of annual commercial record emergency tow permits. Bill before the House Committee on Transportation. The committee recommends the bill to pass. Bill is being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes the chair of the House Transportation Committee, Chairman Roberts, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring House Bill 486 before you today. House Bill 486, you may have recognized it from earlier this year. We had it in the housekeeping bill that GDOT had when we sent over to the Senate, but I guess they think they understand the Constitution better than we do, because even though it was the same chapter, subject matter, and section, they pulled it out. So I'm back with just this portion of that bill before you today. What this bill simply seeks is to rectify, most of you that were here last year know that I brought this bill before you last year. We had a problem where we have emergency towers in this state, and when they were going and towing away semis that may be broken down on the interstate or from wrecks or whatever, they were given overweight tickets. And so we passed a bill last year trying to straighten that problem out. Had a few more problems with public safety and all as far as our definitions. So this year we've brought it back, and I promise you I don't plan on being back before you again next year with this legislation if y'all will help me and pass it today to correct those errors. So this just simply seeks to correct the errors from last year concerning emergency towers only. Mr. Speaker, if there aren't any questions, I'll be glad to yield the will. Thank you.
You have no questions. Gentleman has yielded the will. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 486 will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 486. The ayes are 167, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 463. House Bill 463.
House Bill 463, proposed by Representative Rice, 95th. The bill being entitled Amendment Title 40 relating to motor vehicle licenses and fee classes, so to change registration rates under the International Registration Plan for portion vehicles. Bill has been for the House Committee on Motor Vehicles. The committee recommends the bill do pass. The bill is being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes Chairman Rice to present the bill. Chairman Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the opportunity to bring this bill to you today. This is a bill that's been brought to us by the Georgia Motor Trucking Association. And simply all the bill seeks to do is to take those trucks that are registered under the International Registration Plan, which are basically interstate truckers that get apportioned, is to allow more of these truckers the opportunity to register their vehicles in the state of Georgia by smoothing the way that they go about the whole registration process. The genesis of this basically is that we charge an ad valorem fee by county on trucks that are registered in the state. Most states don't, and it's a disincentive to register your truck in this state. For instance, UPS, one of the largest over-the-road haulers, has no trucks registered in Georgia in these weight classes. They're all registered in Indiana. Why? Because Indiana provides a smooth way of registering and apportioning these trucks. Basically, all this does is seek to say, okay, we're going to raise the rates, which they're in agree with, and frankly, for registration, and then we're going to apportion that back to the counties that are now taking an ad valorem payment for those trucks. So basically, it's an opportunity to fund back the amount that the counties would lose, at the same time allow the trucks a very, very easy way to register and run in this state. Mr. Speaker, that's basically the bill. If there are any questions, I'll take them.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you do have a question.
I'll yield.
If you yield. Chair recognizes Chairman Rogers to your right for a question.
Gentlemen, yield.
Sure.
Just point of clarification. We're just talking about large companies that are not registered in the state of Georgia or domiciled in the state of Georgia.
No, they are domiciled in the state of Georgia. They are registered in the state of Georgia. There's about 5,000 of them that do business here. But the way they have to do business right now is to pay an ad valorem fee on these vehicles in these counties, which raises the entire cost way above the registration fees of operating in the state of Georgia. That's why people don't register here. So what this does is to allow us to collect a fee, a little bit more registration fee, and then apportion that back to the counties where the ad valorem was being collected. They don't touch the counties at this point in time. They get their tag, they get everything directly from the Department of Revenue under this plan.
Okay, further yield.
Yep.
So as far as any other trucking companies in the state, this has no effect.
Just on apportioned vehicles.
Just on the what?
Apportioned vehicles, which are the IRP planned vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
You have another question. If you yield, it's up to you. The gentleman has yielded the will. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on House Bill 463? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 463 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 463. The ayes are 169. The nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. The clerk will read the caption to House Bill 511. House Bill 511.
House Bill 511, Representative Dempsey, the 13th. Bill will be entitled Act Amendment Title 45 relating to state employees' health insurance plans to provide for a pilot program to provide coverage for bariatric surgical procedures. Bill has been for the House Committee on Health and Human Services. Committee recommends the bill to pass by committee substitute. The bill is being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dempsey to present the bill. Chairman Dempsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon. I rise today to share a serious problem that we need to all help with. Georgia ranks today the 17th state in obesity, 12th in diabetes, and 11th in hypertension. HB 511 creates a bariatric surgery benefit pilot program in the state health benefit plan. Some of you may know that this was part of our benefits package for a while, but it has not been allowed to be there because of financing. So this will give us an opportunity to take a serious, limited look, very carefully, to look at the benefits that come from this very important opportunity of surgery for those who need it. It's a 2-year opportunity with 75 participants in each year, a maximum of 75 participants. We're asking the department in partnership to give us statistics that bear out the facts so that a true picture can be taken and we can actually look and see if this would be appropriate to bring back to our benefit package. Statistics bear that the cost of bariatric surgery procedures offset cost savings that begin to accrue as soon as 3 months after surgery, and downstream savings offset initial costs within 2 to 3 years. Beyond this are the cost savings in drug expenditures for comorbidity-related medical expenses. 48 Medicaid plans today do have this, and 43 state health plans currently provide bariatric surgery coverage, with 2 of those states also doing pilot studies today. Mr. Speaker, if there are questions, I will yield the well, but I ask all of our members to consider favorable support to this measure.
Chair, do you yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes for a question Chairman Dollar. To your left, Chairman Dollar.
Thank you for bringing this. It's a 2-year pilot program. How long is the evaluation process after that 2 years?
It continues. If you'll look at the bill, it's spelled out very carefully there. We will follow them for 24 months following right now, for 2 years.
2 years after they have the procedure?
Absolutely.
Or 2 years or 2 years following?
2 years following the procedure. There are many steps to be taken leading up to the procedure, but then after that too. And there are 3 different procedures that can be allowed.
Were there considerations to broadening the term of that? Because as I understand it, the kind of the break-even point for this is around 3 years.
You know, it would be great if we could extend it to 5 years. This is a beginning right now.
I'm not talking about extending the benefit. I'm sorry, does the lady yield? I'm not asking about the extending of the benefit for 5 years, but just the scope in looking at the analysis.
The statistics that come forward, absolutely. This is, I would say, the beginning point to prove that. And there is another resolution I'll be presenting in just a minute that might also give you some more information.
Thank you.
Do you yield for further questions?
Yes, sir, I do.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, Chairman Cooper, to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the lady yield?
Yes, I will.
Is it not true that with patients who had the procedure when the state was paying for these procedures, that the bill also, or at least a resolution coming up, will go back to those patients and also collect valuable information from them on how successful their surgery has been?
This bill will do that with those in this study, but the resolution, as you're familiar with, will do that also in just a minute.
So that we can collect those, and those will be people who had the surgery 3, 4, and 5 years ago. So we will capture the information that Representative Dollar is wanting.
Yes, it will. Thank you.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir, I will. One more question, and then let's move on, because I know there's some important measures to get to this evening.
Chair recognizes Representative Taylor to your right for a question. Representative Darlene Taylor.
Thank you. Will the lady yield?
Yes, I will.
Isn't it known that one of the unknown, unexpected consequences was that the decrease in diabetics that has had a major effect on keeping people from being a diabetic?
It certainly is, and it happens very quickly. In some of the procedures, and depending on how much weight, almost instantly, within months.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Mr. Speaker, if there are no further questions, I'll yield the will and ask for your favorable support.
There were questions, but the lady has yielded. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 511 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines.